Hey everyone, my name is Kim Krauser, and first I'd like to say thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. It is about 40 minutes. I want to share some information with you that I passionately believe should be in the hands of everyone. And I wanted also to introduce you to an exciting new program I've created called Breath by Design. What I've done is develop a whole person experiential program that I think will become a lifelong resource that will dramatically improve your health by understanding and supporting your design through conscious breathing. For those of you who don't know me, I've been working and educating myself in the mindful movement fitness field for most of my life. And my interest has always been in not just understanding concepts intellectually, but in directly embodying these mindful movement exercise practices. Over the years, I've used everything I've learned as inspiration to develop creative, effective programs for both my clients and for instructors around the world that they can experience themselves and then share with their communities. Well, now I'm doing the same thing with breath. So let's get to the presentation where I'll share with you what I've been up to lately. Be sure to watch right through to the end while I'll have a special limited time offer to enroll in my 10-day Breath by Design program. So, like I said, over the last year, I've taken a deeper dive into researching all things breath related: physiology, biomechanics, biochemistry, neurology, you get the idea, along with a wide array of techniques centered around the concept of breath optimization for improved health and performance. What I've learned, quite frankly, left me feeling shocked, humbled, and a little frustrated. I'm shocked by the vastness of well-documented research that spans 100+ years, humbled because I've been in the mindful movement field for over 25 years, and until now, my knowledge base was only a fraction of what it should have been, and frustrated that I've personally struggled most of my life with what I thought was a fragile body with a mysterious low-grade immune system. I've come to realize that the majority of my health issues could have been supported, if not alleviated, by improving my breathing habits. Through this learning process, I've landed on two big conclusions. One, there's a staggering amount of well-documented research across a spectrum of topics that, when consolidated, map out an amazing guide to better health and performance. And two, most of these very basic concepts are still not widely communicated, incorporated, or simply valued as common practice across the board in all realms of health and fitness. This is an opportunity that's not just under our nose, it literally is our nose. And it's this realization that inspired me to create Breath by Design. So this little presentation is the beginning of my contribution to share these well-documented, well-researched breathing concepts with you and show you how you can powerfully influence your health by participating in the 10-day Breath by Design program. I hope you'll see and agree that this information is needed in the world, and we all can be part of a breathing revolution that I feel is truly everyone's birthright. Now, I think a bit of a backstory would be helpful for you to understand why I feel so strongly about this program and its potential to elevate the quality of your life. I've been active my whole life, but from an early age, I struggled with my health. I've only recently come to realize that lifelong faulty breathing habits have been a major contributor to my health challenges. Starting with a diagnosis at age 12 of an autoimmune disease called Graves' disease, poor aerobic capacity, even though I was a really fit competitive athlete, chronic blood pH imbalances, which manifested as joint and muscle pain, inflammation. I had poor quality sleep, chronic throat infections, low blood pressure and dizziness, poor circulation in my extremities, my hands and my feet, and just a generally weak immune system. I worked really hard to manage my nutrition, my stress levels, and my sleep, but I always walked a fine line between health and illness. For some reason, though, I always believed the answers to optimal health weren't found in pharmaceuticals. I believe they reside in the innate healing intelligence of the body. Over the last 18 to 24 months of implementing new but really basic breathing habits, I've experienced incredible improvements in many of the issues I've listed. Big improvements in my aerobic capacity. My hands and feet are rarely cold or numb. I have better capacity to handle stressful events, no more lightheadedness, and an overall improvement in my general well-being and vitality. No expensive vitamins, no special equipment, no additional time spent in the gym, just a heightened awareness of how I'm using my breath as a tool and as a supportive companion through the day and night. Okay, let's get started by looking at a few statements about breathing that are out there right now that you might have heard, you might agree, or you might disagree with. My plan is by the end of this little presentation, we'll all be in agreement with whether these statements are myth or fact. Are you stressed, anxious, want to calm down? The solution is to take big breaths in and out. Oxygen in the body, really good. But CO2 or carbon dioxide in the body, not good. The only way to improve my fitness is to train more, to exercise more. Breathing is automatic. I don't have to think about breathing. As long as I'm breathing, it doesn't matter if I breathe through my nose or through my mouth. Now bear with me as I start at the beginning with a little sciencey review, but keep in mind that the info that I'm going to share is considerably more complex than what you're going to see here. My main objective today is just to highlight basic insights and hopefully intrigue you enough that you'll want to explore these concepts with me experientially in Breath by Design. Now here's what I'm sure you all know. When we inhale, air enters our body, nose or mouth. We'll talk about what path is best in a moment. Flows down the windpipe or the trachea. It then splits into two tubes called bronchi, where it goes into the lungs, and then it continues to break into smaller and smaller branches called bronchioli. It finishes in tiny air sacs called alveoli, of which we have 300 million. And these alveoli are surrounded by tiny blood vessels called capillaries. The alveoli is where oxygen leaves the lungs and enters the bloodstream, where it's then able to travel throughout the body. So now let's look at this transport system through the blood. I'm going to use oxygen and O2 interchangeably, as well as carbon dioxide and CO2, okay? Let's look at this relationship between O2 and CO2 in the body. Once oxygen enters the blood, it attaches to hemoglobin and begins its journey through the circulatory system. Oxygen's the body's primary fuel source, but in order for it to be utilized, it has to first be released from the blood, and we'll discuss this more in a moment. Now, CO2 doesn't come in from the atmosphere like oxygen. It's produced in the body through digestion, organ function, working muscles, etc. Once CO2 is produced, it makes its way into the blood, is carried to the lungs where it's exhaled. But here's what you may not know. Not all of the CO2 is exhaled. Some is retained and reabsorbed back into the blood along with fresh oxygen. The CO2 that's retained in the body is a key factor in determining your ability to use oxygen for energy. Now, because oxygen is such a critical energy source, our bodies are really well designed to capture it from the air. With every breath you take, your blood is pretty much always 95% plus saturated with oxygen. Now, this brings us to the first myth. Are you stressed? Are you anxious? Then take big breaths in and blow it out. This myth of being stressed and anxious is sometimes accompanied with the idea that we're lacking oxygen, and by taking big breaths in and blowing it out, we'll be supplying our body with more. But remember, from the last slide, our blood is almost always fully saturated with O2 at any given time. So taking bigger breaths to get more oxygen is like trying to fill an already full glass of water. Now, there are conscious breathing methods that can effectively release stress and calm an anxious state, but they're the opposite of large and effortful breaths. They're practices that encourage slow, quiet, effortless breathing. Let's take a closer look at CO2. So you're most likely getting the sense now that CO2 isn't just a waste gas that you breathe out. It acts like a gatekeeper that's responsible for moving oxygen out of the blood and into your cells. We need optimal amounts of CO2 in our bodies if we're going to have these active gatekeepers ready to throw open the doors and allow oxygen in our blood to be delivered to our muscles, organs, brain, etc. Along with being a gatekeeper, CO2 is also a powerful vasodilator. It helps to open blood vessels and airways for better breathing and better blood circulation. Low levels of CO2 in the body can result in blood vessels and airways being more constricted, leading to issues with breathing, blood pressure, heart function, circulation, mental clarity, and more. CO2 levels in the blood are managed by special chemoreceptors or sensors in the brain that act like a thermostat in your house, and it's called your CO2 set point. Like a thermostat setting in your house, when CO2 levels in the body start to climb above an established set point, the brain triggers the respiratory system to increase your breathing rate and expel more CO2. One simple example to understand the CO2 set point is to imagine a deconditioned person and a trained athlete climbing the same steep set of stairs. As they begin to climb, their muscles start to work, which produces CO2. Those rising CO2 levels eventually inform the chemoreceptors in the brain to trigger the breathing muscles in the abdomen and the neck area to kick in, causing you to breathe at a faster rate, which adjusts your oxygen and CO2 pressures in your body to match your set point. Now, a well-trained athlete is going to be more accustomed to their muscles producing CO2, so they may notice the breathing rate is slightly elevated, while the deconditioned climber is huffing and puffing by the time they reach the top of the stairs. In this scenario, it's pretty safe to assume that the athlete has a higher CO2 set point or CO2 tolerance than the untrained stair climber. However, here's the interesting point when looking at the athlete. When they're not training, meaning all the other hours of their day and night, they could unknowingly, through unconscious breathing habits, be training their body to drag the needle of their set point down. Remember, low CO2 levels in the blood impacts your ability to use oxygen circulating in the blood as fuel and to open up clear pathways for breathing and blood flow. So training at high intensities can move the CO2 set point higher, but your breathing habits during all the other hours of your day and night could be pulling that set point to lower than optimal levels. A lower than ideal set point creates this vicious cycle of continued unconscious overbreathing, also called low-grade chronic hyperventilation, resulting in too much CO2 being exhaled from the lungs and removed from the blood. And when you do this habitually for extended periods of weeks and months and years, a biochemical change occurs where your set point resets, lowering your CO2 tolerance, turning your thermostat setting down. We'll talk more about the signs and impacts of unconscious overbreathing as we move along. Ready for the next myth? Oxygen in the body, absolutely, so good. But carbon dioxide in the body, also really great, really necessary. What's air hunger? Air hunger is the urge to breathe that's triggered by a primal reflex in your body that's called your ventilatory response to CO2. It's a reaction and a sensation that can help you determine what your current tolerance to CO2 levels are. In my Breath by Design program, I'll be coaching you to become friendly with this sensation. We'll use air hunger both as a testing tool and as a training tool for tracking and potentially raising your CO2 set point. Let's see if you can feel the air hunger reflex in your body by doing a simple breath hold. Let's practice this. So first begin by just closing your mouth and breathing quietly in and out through your nose. Let's inhale and exhale again. And toward the end of your exhale, plug your nose with your fingers and hold your breath. Now, as you're holding your breath, your oxygen levels will start to drop, CO2 levels will rise, and at some point you'll feel either a twitch in your neck or your belly. These are your breathing muscles trying to contract to make you start breathing again. Can you sense this? When you feel that reflexive urge to breathe, just release your nose and resume normal breathing again. If you released your nose now and you had to gasp or take a really dramatic inhale, it just means you're a little late in registering that first impulse to breathe. If you released your nose after that first impulse, you should be able to calmly resume breathing through your nose. Okay, let's try this again and we'll time ourselves. Mouth closed, breathe in through the nose. Breathe out through the nose. Get ready, plug your nose and hold your breath. Oxygen levels will be dropping. And see if you can sense that first impulse, that little twitch, either in your belly or your neck. Whenever you feel it, just release and note the time. Remember the time. Remember, if you hold too long and you have to breathe really dramatically, you kind of miss that first impulse. Okay, have we noted the time? The number of seconds you registered is your current BOLT score, which stands for Body Oxygen Level Test. This simple test measures how much CO2 you can accumulate or tolerate while your O2 CO2 pressures are changing during a breath hold. And this gives you a sense of what your current CO2 set point is. So how did you score? Less than 10 seconds? Between 10 and 20 seconds? 20 to 25? More than 25? The typical score for a BOLT test is 10 to 20 seconds. This is where most people fit into, including athletes. I've done this test with high-level athletes, and so far, not one person scored above 24, and most were between that 15 to 20 seconds. Now, these people train their aerobic capacity at a high level every day, yet they are, for the most part, still scoring in the typical range. They're able to tolerate higher CO2 levels while they're exercising, so there must be something they're doing on their off hours to move their set point lower. So these athletes don't need to exercise more or train harder. They need to improve their breathing habits, improve their BOLT score, and watch their performance skyrocket. What do you think is the optimal score for health and performance? 40 plus seconds. So for most of us, there's lots of room for improvement, but imagine how you'd feel if your body was able to fully tap into that oxygen resource circulating through your blood, ready and available to be consumed. My first BOLT score came in at 15 seconds, and over the last 2 years, I've managed to raise it to just over 30. I've already mentioned how much better I feel. I can't imagine what 40 is going to feel like. Let's look at this myth. The only way to improve my fitness is to exercise more. Fitness can improve your tolerance to rising CO2 levels while exercising, but it doesn't necessarily cross over to improve general health. But a conscious breathing practice can both improve your overall health markers and increase your fitness performance. If you recall the myth, breathing is automatic, I can tell you now that that's true, but there's much more to this story. Because we breathe between 17 to 20,000 times a day, it makes sense we don't have to consciously think about every breath we take. Unconscious breathing is one part of a larger system that governs many of our automatic, unconscious body functions called the autonomic nervous system. This system is hardwired into our body as a survival strategy that the brain uses to determine how to best respond to events in the environment. Are you safe or are you under threat? When your brain senses threat, your breathing rate instantly elevates, and this sets off a cascade of events in the body. When your brain registers the threat is ended, the breathing rate slows down, which also sparks many other body system functions to adapt to a new, calmer state. The autonomic nervous system operates at lightning speed without your conscious control. Now, way back in prehistoric times, we relied heavily on this system. If a saber-toothed tiger, for example, was chasing us, our brain registers threat, and our body systems instantly kick into a state that helps us either freeze, stay and fight, or turn and flee. This state is the branch of the autonomic nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. Your breathing rate becomes shallow and rapid. Your pupils dilate, widening your visual field. Your heart rate, your blood pressure elevate to quickly divert blood to your working muscles. And you get a flash flood of hormones that instantly boost mental alertness. Even though we no longer have to fight saber-toothed tigers on a regular basis, these primal systems are still in place. And because they operate without our conscious control, they can secretly contribute to sabotaging our health and vitality. The kind of stress many of us deal with today tends to trigger more of a low-grade chronic fight, flight, freeze state, keeping all these systemic responses listed here operating on overtime without the opportunity to rest and recover. The opposite to sympathetic is parasympathetic. This system opposes fight, flight, freeze. This is the system that brings the body back to balance or homeostasis. Only when the body is in this state of calm can the focus be turned toward growth, processing, and repair. When the brain perceives threat, there's less capacity for healthy human connection and less potential for creativity. Remember, I mentioned these systems aren't driven by the conscious mind. They're deeply programmed, and they kick in immediately when your primal brain region registers threat or safety. Living in a state of chronic stress can unknowingly hold you hostage in this low-grade sympathetic state, which has a profound impact on how you're unconsciously training yourself to breathe, rest and restore, digest, express, and grow. So here's the rest of the story relating to the myth, breathing is automatic. Yes, breathing is an unconscious act, but by consciously intervening with breath-based exercises, you can train these systems to work for you rather than defaulting to old habits and deeply set patterns that might not be serving you anymore. Adopting a simple breath practice can help restore or reveal your true design. And our true design is a flexible autonomic nervous system. And improving breathing habits, improving something you do 17 to 20,000 times a day is how you get there. A regular breath-based practice can even begin to alter how your brain recognizes and responds to potentially stressful situations, building your tolerance to manage life's stressful events without triggering a strong sympathetic response. The Breath by Design program will provide you with many tools you can call on anytime to move you at will between these two nervous system states. The glowing pink structure you see in this image is the diaphragm, your primary breathing muscle. It splits your body into an upper and lower half. The lungs and heart live above, and the abdominal organs and viscera are tightly packed in below. I'd like to take you through a simple breathing experiential. Let's begin by placing our hands on our upper chest, sitting nice and tall, comfortably sitting tall without strain. The next time you inhale, can you imagine your lungs expanding and feel how your ribcage also expands to accommodate your growing lungs? Now as you exhale, can you picture your lungs shrinking and feel the ribcage soften, drop, and narrow? Now, the diaphragm muscle is actually what drives the inflating action of the lungs. When you inhale, the diaphragm contracts, flattens its shape, and moves in a downward direction, creating a vacuum effect that draws air in and inflates the lungs. When the diaphragm muscle relaxes, it rises back up into its dome shape and the lungs deflate. As you inhale, can you imagine the diaphragm contracting, descending, and drawing the air in? Then relaxing and rising, emptying the lungs as you exhale. Now let's experience the area below the diaphragm, the abdomen. Place your hands on your belly. And when the diaphragm moves down on your inhale, the size of your abdominal cavity reduces and the organs and viscera get squished, which causes your belly to expand outward a bit. The exhale sends the diaphragm back up, restores the space down there, and you should feel your belly draw gently in. Belly expands on the inhale and draws gently in on the exhale. Let's finish by integrating these three ideas. This time, place one hand on your chest and one on your belly. On your next inhale, picture your diaphragm contracting and dropping as the chest and belly gently expand. Exhale to empty the lungs and flatten the belly as the diaphragm rises. Rest your arms, but see if you can continue breathing mindfully as you follow along. The final myth. As long as I'm breathing, it doesn't matter if I breathe through my nose or through my mouth. Can you guess what would be better for you, breathing through your mouth or nose? Or does it even matter? The nose has been perfectly designed for breathing. As air enters your nostrils, it has to travel through a maze of passageways called turbinates, where it's warmed and moistened before it makes its way to the lungs. Air in this warm, humid state can then effortlessly and efficiently flow into the blood. The inside of the nasal cavity is lined with microscopic hairs called cilia that act like a filter to keep viruses and bacteria from making their way into the lungs. Why breathing through your nose hasn't been a major part of the conversation during this global pandemic is a total mystery to me. Wash your hands, wear a mask, and breathe through your nose. Breathing through a small airway like the nasal passages also forces the diaphragm muscle to work a little harder to create that vacuum effect to draw air in, making the nose a natural, built-in strength training tool for your primary breathing muscle, your diaphragm. The smaller nasal air passages also naturally reduce the rate and the volume per minute of air coming into your body. If you don't already breathe mainly through your nose, this simple change alone can make a big difference in moving you closer to a more optimal CO2 set point and raise your BOLT score. We've already talked about CO2 as being a vasodilator. Now we have nitric oxide to add to the story. Located above the nasal cavity is a reservoir of nitric oxide. When you breathe through your nose, you stimulate the release of nitric oxide into the nasal passageways, which then gets drawn down into the lungs and into the bloodstream, instantly opening airways and blood vessels. If constricted blood vessels increase blood pressure, stress the heart muscle, numb fingers and toes, create lightheadedness, dizziness, mental fog, unexplained fatigue, and more, the exact opposite happens when blood vessels and airways are fully open. Use it or lose it is a phrase that can accurately be applied to every area of the body, so the same goes for the nose. The more you breathe through the nose, the better it functions. Breathing through your nose increases saliva production, which is a key to a healthy digestive system. You also hold on to water during nasal breathing so your body can stay more hydrated. Every organ and system performs better when the body is hydrated. It's also a huge advantage during exercise. Endurance athletes can now be seen performing long-distance runs with their mouth taped shut, training themselves to breathe exclusively through their nose. They finish the event feeling energized without taking a single drink. Breathing through the nose requires the head to be positioned directly over the shoulders in order to create a clear pathway down the trachea to the lungs, so nasal breathing can quickly help you improve that collapsed chest forward head posture position. Making the simple change to nasal breathing can play a strong role in supporting a more ideal posture. But there's more that needs to be considered. Your habits reshape muscle and fascia to match how you position your body every day. A well-designed, breath-driven movement program like Breath by Design that focuses on opening the chest, restoring resiliency in the ribcage, mobilizing the spine and the shoulders is also needed to accompany nasal breathing in order to make a significant long-term change. The mouth is designed for eating and talking. The passageway from the mouth is open and direct, no time for preparing the air before it makes its way to the lungs. There's no filter system in the mouth, so no barrier to viruses and bacteria. Breathing habitually through the mouth means the nose becomes less conditioned to perform optimally. Try this. Open your mouth and take a big, quick breath in. Mouth breathing stimulates the muscles of the upper chest area, keeping air higher in the lungs and triggering your secondary or emergency breathing muscles. Breathing regularly through the mouth can contribute to holding you unknowingly in that low-grade chronic fight-flight-freeze state I mentioned earlier. Finally, with mouth breathing, you're not able to tap into that nitric oxide reservoir, which limits how much blood vessels and airways can open. Because the mouth is a larger open space, mouth breathing contributes to overbreathing, bringing in more air into your body than you need. Taking more air in than you need is as stressful to your body as taking in more food than you need. It also drags your CO2 set point down and lowers your BOLT score. If you look at the image on the screen, you can see on a cold day when you breathe through your mouth, you create a large cloud of vapor. 40% more water leaves your body when you mouth breathe, which quickly dehydrates you, leaving you feeling chronically thirsty. Next time you're in the cold, compare mouth breathing to breathing quietly through your nose and notice how little vapor escapes during nasal breathing. In order to breathe through the mouth, it must be open, obviously. The tongue then will have to drop down to the lower palate, and if the head is jutting forward, the air can pass more freely, so that less desirable, faulty forward head posture best supports mouth breathing. Here's best practice for optimal breathing. Lips together, jaw relaxed, the tongue resting up on the roof of the mouth with the tip of the tongue back behind the front teeth, not pushing forward and touching them. Notice how this feels to you as you breathe in and out. Does it feel natural, or do you think it's something that you might have to practice? This did not feel at all normal to me initially. I had to check in many times during the day to remind myself to switch from mouth breathing to nasal breathing. At night, I put a small piece of paper tape vertically on my mouth to train myself to keep my mouth closed and breathe through my nose while sleeping, because all the positive gains I was beginning to make during the day were lost every night by 8 hours of steady mouth breathing. We're becoming a society of overbreathers. Over the last 80 years, what's considered a normal breathing rate and volume has dramatically increased. In the 1940s, a breathing rate of approximately 8 to 12 breaths per minute and a volume of 8 liters was considered normal. Now look at the 80s, 12 to 14 breaths at a volume of 9 to 12 liters per minute. And today, the normal rate has increased to 12 to 20 beats per minute and up to double the volume from the 1940s. Evolving the innate design of the human body is an incredibly slow process, so it makes sense that such a dramatic increase in just a generation or two of our breathing rate and volume would be taxing on every one of our body's processing systems. Ideally, your breathing rate and volume should match your body's metabolic needs, and for most of us, that means less is more. The optimal breathing rate at rest and during mild exercise is approximately 10 to 12 breaths per minute at a volume of 5 to 6 liters. Try breathing slowly and softly through your nose, of course, at a rate of about 3 seconds to inhale and 3 seconds to exhale. The feather in this slide is meant to remind me to tell you the story of samurai warriors in training centuries ago. When considering whether one of his men is fit and ready for battle, the general would call them in and hold a feather under their nose. If the feather is so much as slightly disturbed by their breathing, meaning they're breathing at a volume and a rate that's high enough to move the fragile feather, back they go to training camp. They didn't necessarily have the science, but they understood the value soft, light, and slow breathing has on the mind and body. Breathing rhythmically is also a very important habit to develop. Coherence training is a term used to describe a breathing technique that practices slow, rhythmic breathing. This conscious breathing practice has proven to improve your HRV, or heart rate variability. Increasing HRV is quickly becoming one of today's most valuable markers to determine total body health and vitality, and there are a variety of HRV training techniques that I'll guide you through every day during my Breath by Design program. This technique teaches a slower than optimal breathing rate and volume, 5 to 6 breaths per minute, which is approximately a 5.5 second long inhale, followed by a 5.5 second long exhale. Are you overbreathing? Here's a few signs and symptoms that you or someone you know may be overbreathing. A low Bolt score or a low tolerance to rising CO2 pressures in your body could be the result of overbreathing. Habitually breathing through your mouth day and night equals overbreathing. If you breathe with an intensity to make noise while sleeping, aka snoring, you're overbreathing. If you can hear yourself or somebody else breathing, that's overbreathing. If you can see someone's chest and shoulders rising and falling with every breath, they're definitely overbreathing. This is a tricky one, excessive sighing and yawning. Another way your brain's breathing sensors can get you to pull an excess of air in and expel a high volume of CO2 out is by excessively sighing, and yawning. Do you know anyone who does this? Pay attention. You'll notice that one. It's a common habit. Unfortunately, people who have to talk a lot for their jobs, like teachers, run the risk of overbreathing. While you might not be able to eliminate talking in your life, Breath by Design will be teaching you simple ways to restore those CO2, O2 pressures in your body after a long day of talking. If you have a dry mouth or you're thirsty all the time, especially at night or when you wake up in the morning, you're most likely mouth breathing and overbreathing. And finally, if you notice your muscles cramp a lot, especially if you're an athlete, also try to notice if you're breathing predominantly through your mouth. Switching to nasal breathing as often as possible, even during training, can help supply your working muscles with an abundance of circulating oxygen, virtually eliminating cramps and spasms. Okay, ready to revisit these myths? Stressed, anxious, want to calm down? Take some deep breaths in and out. Deep breathing is good for you, but taking large breaths in and out actually revs up your sympathetic nervous system. The best way to calm a stressed, anxious mind is with slow, calm, quiet, diaphragmatic breaths. Oxygen in the body, good. Carbon dioxide in the body, we now know is very important. It's not a poisonous waste gas that you want to get rid of. You need CO2 to be available at a level that frees oxygen from the blood so we can provide adequate fuel for the body. The only way to improve my fitness is to exercise more. The best way to improve your athletic performance and your physical and mental health is to breathe better. Most of us are underutilizing our breathing potential. It's easy, it's free, no equipment's needed, just a bit of mindful attention every day. Improving cardiovascular performance doesn't necessarily improve functional breathing, but improve your functional breathing and you will significantly improve performance. We do not have to think about every inhale and exhale we take, thank goodness. But performing conscious breathing exercises can improve your unconscious breathing habits day and night. And lastly, nose breathing is our design. Mouths are for eating and talking. Here are just some of the many benefits of a breath focus practice. Every one of these points deserves deeper exploration that I'd love to elaborate on, but I think I need to wrap this up for today. What I do want you to understand here, though, is these points are the result of better breathing, being able to better utilize oxygen so every cell in the body receives the fuel it needs to thrive. I really hope by this point you believe that making conscious changes to your unconscious breathing habits could profoundly impact your health for the better. But where do you go from here? The science around behavior or changing habits suggests positive outcomes require significant support. A fully supported, guided, breath-driven program is what I'd love to offer you. My Breath by Design program is a simple platform that houses a wide variety of techniques and approaches to using breath as the foundation for improved health and performance. Breath by Design is a guided journey toward optimal health and performance through conscious breathing in stillness and in motion. At the end of this program, you'll never take your breath for granted again. Perhaps one reason why these health-enhancing breath techniques are not common practice is because many are packaged within a philosophy, a dogma, or a spiritual practice that may not be of interest to everyone. My program will demystify these approaches by simply sharing the science and the tools needed to reap the beneficial outcomes. At the end of the program, you'll have acquired a vast library of breath-guided practices you can continue to follow and customize to suit your busy life, your specific needs, and your personal preferences. Support from a community is also necessary when changing habits, so I'll be creating a private community page where we can share our stories, give feedback, ask questions, comment on what you and others are experiencing, and share the many accounts of how Breath by Design is impacting your life. Now let me break this program down a little more with you. We'll start with the 10-minute morning breath practice you can do before you even get up and out of bed. Next, you'll carve out time at some point in your day to be guided through either a 30 to 40-minute mat-based video workout or a 30-minute audio walking program. You'll end the day with another 10-minute evening breath practice, totaling a 50 to 60-minute commitment per day. Every morning session will be different, but each one is specifically designed to support you as you prepare to face the challenges of your day. Shown here is just a sample of what the sessions will focus on. The audio-guided walking programs are the movement sessions that will alternate with mat-based workouts. For the walking program, nothing is needed other than a good pair of sneakers, a flat walking terrain, and headphones to follow along. The mat-based movement sessions are where we address the potential physical roadblocks to breathing optimally. We'll acknowledge postural imbalances, release restricted movement in the ribs, the spine, the hips, the neck, the shoulders, giving you access to effortless, efficient breathing. We'll improve the tone and elasticity of your number one breathing muscle, your diaphragm. I'll guide you to breathe slowly, softly, and rhythmically while performing whole body movements, and much, much more. Finally, the end of day practice will again be different every day, and of course the objectives will be much different than the morning practice sessions. Shown here are a few examples. So what's next? Start your journey. Enroll in the program. The links are provided at the end of this presentation. And once you enroll, join my private community page where we can connect, and you can connect with a community of like-minded people who are looking to do exactly what you're doing, improve their breathing habits. I will be offering a master class. This is a 90-minute class that you could try if you first want to get a taste of the program before you commit. You can purchase the class online, or you can reach out to me and I'll let you know when I'll be running the next live in studio or live stream class. And if you have a group that you know are interested, email me and together we'll arrange a private masterclass for your group. This presentation is essential viewing prior to taking a masterclass and of course before joining the program, the Breath by Design program. So to enroll, you can just follow the links at the end of the presentation. And if you have any questions, please send me a note, kim@interlude.com. Thanks so much for your interest, and I really appreciate you giving up valuable time in your life to find out what's driving my passion these days. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again. Have a great day.